Germany's firework bomb night. On December 31st, 2024, a 24-year-old man from Bad Wünnenberg carried a heavy box of illegal Kugelbomben to a field near Geseke, convinced that proper New Year's fireworks had to be louder and brighter than anything sold in a supermarket. Across Germany, groups of mostly young men were doing the same thing, trading videos of last year's explosions and boasting about black market rockets and homemade devices. Police warnings on television sounded distant compared with the thrill of lighting something powerful. By late evening, the air above many cities already glowed with legal rockets, but in side streets and open fields, the real show was only starting. The group near Geseke set up their biggest Kugelbombe in a makeshift tube and stepped back. It was supposed to soar high before bursting into a perfect sphere of fire. Instead, after a short, uncertain fizz, the device detonated almost at ground level. The blast was brutal and close. Shrapnel and burning fragments tore through the group, knocking people off their feet. Friends screamed for help and tried desperately to stop the bleeding, but the young man who had brought the device had injuries no bystander could treat. Similar scenes unfolded in other towns, where illegal firework bombs exploded in hands, at feet, or on crowded streets, leaving craters in the asphalt and scraps of clothing scattered among the cardboard. When the sun rose on January 1st, 5 people across Germany were dead and hundreds were injured by fireworks, from scorched corneas and torn eardrums to amputated fingers and shattered bones. Footage of Kugelbomben shredding trash cans and blowing out windows flooded social media, no longer posted as proud stunts but as evidence. Politicians and police unions demanded tougher laws, while campaigns like Bollertiao asked whether private fireworks were worth the yearly cost. For the families of the dead, the answer had already arrived in a single flash of light on a frozen field: the Santika nightclub inferno. On January 1st, 2009, club owner Wiesek Setsawat watched the Santika nightclub in Bangkok fill with around 1,000 guests as the rock band Burn played their New Year's Eve set. The Ekamai venue looked glamorous from the outside, a place where people expected champagne showers and confetti at midnight, not an emergency exit sign. Inside, the ceiling was low, the soundproofing was flammable, and most visitors believed the one obvious front door was more than enough. Santika was legally registered as a restaurant, not a nightclub, which meant inspections had been far less strict. A staff door at the back and another locked exit existed mostly in paperwork. As the countdown passed and the band kept playing, someone lit indoor fireworks or stage effects near the musicians. From the dance floor, it just looked like part of the show. A brief spray of sparks swallowed by strobe lights and smoke machines. Up near the ceiling, hidden behind decorations, those sparks became something else. Fire ran along insulation and cables until thick black smoke began to spread above the crowd. At first, some guests thought it was another special effect. Then the power faltered, the music cut out, and the smoke dropped in a heavy layer that burned in people's throats and eyes. In seconds, calm turned into blind panic. Hundreds of people lunged toward the main entrance at once, turning the doorway into a crushing funnel. Those who fell near the front were pinned by the weight of everyone behind them. Others groped their way toward the staff door or the locked exit and collapsed before they could escape the toxic fumes. By the time firefighters fought their way in, 67 people were dead, and more than 200 were injured. The burnt shell of Santika, once marketed as the perfect place to start the year, stood as a blackened reminder that in a crowded room, one locked door can be the difference between a party and a mass casualty scene. The stray bullet in Miami. On January 1st, 2025, 10-year-old Yanelise Munguia stood in the parking lot of her apartment complex in northwest Miami, proudly holding a sparkler while her family lit small fireworks on the asphalt. She had just celebrated her birthday after Christmas, and staying up for the New Year's countdown felt like a big step toward being grown up. Around her, neighbors laughed, music played from open windows, and fountains of colored sparks hissed into the night. The dangers her family worried about were on the ground. They told the younger kids not to get too close to the fireworks, to keep away from cars, to listen when an adult said, "Stop." What they could not see was the real threat rising far above them. Somewhere in the neighborhood, someone decided that fireworks were not loud enough and fired a gun into the air. Another piece of so-called celebratory gunfire that people convinced themselves is harmless because the bullet just goes up. High overhead, that bullet slowed, stopped, and began to fall. Gravity dragged it back down toward the rows of parked cars and the small crowd of families. Yanelise watched a simple ground firework crackle in front of her, then suddenly collapsed. Relatives rushed to her, confused, until they saw the wound at the back of her head. There had been no argument, no visible attacker, only a single invisible object dropping out of the sky. Her family raced her to a hospital while emergency services converged on the complex, but doctors could not save her. Detectives opened a homicide investigation and appealed for witnesses, explaining once again that bullets do not vanish when they leave the barrel. For Yanelise's parents and younger brother, New Year's Eve is no longer a noisy night of color and laughter. Every echo of a distant bang now sounds like the moment a stray bullet turned a parking lot celebration into the first tragedy of the year. The Abidjan Stadium Stampede. On January 1st, 2013, 13-year-old Mariam, name changed, held her little brother's hand outside the Félix Houphouët-Boigny Stadium in Abidjan as a huge official fireworks show lit up the sky. President Alassane Ouattara's government wanted the display to mark a new era after years of crisis, and tens of thousands of people responded. Families filled the Plateau district. Children sat on shoulders, and for an hour the night was all color and noise. When the last rockets faded, the crowd shifted from standing and staring upward to walking, pushing, and trying to get home. Streams of people funneled toward a few main routes along the Boulevard de la République. In the dim early morning light, groups merged, split, and squeezed through narrow passages. Security forces tried to guide the flow, but the sheer number of bodies turned every corner into a potential bottleneck. Near a small pit and a tight bend outside the stadium, two streams of people met. Those at the front slowed or stumbled. Those behind, still in motion and unable to see what was happening ahead, kept pressing forward. A few people fell on the uneven ground. Others tripped over them. Within seconds, the moving crowd became a mound of bodies, layers of adults and children, trapped with no space to breathe. Rescuers and soldiers clawed a path into the crush, dragging out the injured and the unconscious. Shoes, toys, and clothing were left scattered across the road, mute evidence of the moment when joy turned to terror. 61 people died and more than 200 were hurt, many of them children who had simply come to watch fireworks. The government declared days of mourning and promised better planning, but for Mariam's family and countless others, New Year's Eve in Abidjan will always be the night when the crowd itself became the deadliest force on the street. The Honolulu fireworks explosion. On December 31st, 2024, 61-year-old Carmelita Benigno stood in the carport of a home on Kayaka Drive in Honolulu's Aliamanu neighborhood, surrounded by relatives and friends and by boxes of powerful aerial fireworks. Her sister Nayli Ibarra, her grandson Cassius Ramos Benigno, and 23-year-old family friend Jennifer Vaughn were all there, laughing and taking photos as the driveway slowly turned into a mini firework depot. In Hawaii, backyard New Year's shows have long been part of the culture, even when the devices used are technically illegal. The carport was stacked with crates of mortar-style cakes and shells, their bright labels promising gigantic bursts and thunderous booms. Children darted between adults, flinching but grinning when smaller fireworks crackled at the edge of the street. The sky above Aliamanu was already full of light from other neighborhoods, each explosion encouraging someone to bring out something bigger from the pile. Shortly after midnight, a rack of aerial fireworks was set up near the driveway. Someone lit the fuse and stepped back, expecting a controlled volley of shots into the sky. Instead, the base shifted, the rack tipped, and several blazing projectiles blasted horizontally into the stored fireworks inside the carport. In an instant, sparks met cardboard and fuses, and the entire stockpile erupted in a deafening chain reaction. The explosion tore through the carport, shredding vehicles, ripping apart parts of the house, and showering burning debris across the block. Neighbors described a white flash, a pressure wave, and then screams. When firefighters and paramedics arrived, the scene looked like the aftermath of a bombing. Carmelita, Neely, Jennifer, and little Cassius were among those fatally injured, and the death toll rose to 6 as more victims died in hospital. Dozens more suffered life-changing burns. In the weeks that followed, Hawaii's governor pushed for tougher penalties and stricter enforcement against illegal fireworks. For the surviving family, those new rules are a distant consolation. Their memory of New Year's Eve will always be a single tipped firework and the moment their home became the center of a deadly blast. Terrigal's fireworks barge. On December 31st, 2017, 2 pyrotechnicians worked on a floating fireworks barge just off Terrigal Beach on the New South Wales Central Coast, while thousands of people set up blankets and folding chairs along the sand for the early New Year's Eve show. Families with children crowded the shoreline, boats drifted in the bay, and all eyes were on the dark rectangle of the barge that would send the fireworks into the sky. As the sun disappeared and the sea turned black, the barge became the glowing center of the scene. When the first shells roared upward just after 9 in the evening, the crowd cheered at the bright bursts of color over the water. For a few moments, the show followed a perfect rhythm, each explosion reflected on the waves. Exactly what people expected from a safe, organized display. Then something on the barge went wrong. A firework misfired, or a spark landed where it should not. And instead of single shells arcing high into the sky, a cluster of fireworks ignited almost at once. Flames raced along the racks. The 2 operators suddenly found themselves standing on a deck that was turning into a wall of fire. With only seconds to react, they abandoned their controls and jumped overboard into the dark water as more fireworks detonated above and around them. On the beach, the change looked terrifying. Fireworks shot out at strange angles, smoke poured from the barge, and people began to scream as officials shouted for everyone to move back. Parents grabbed their children and ran while emergency services rushed to the scene. The 2 injured pyrotechnicians were pulled from the water and taken to hospital, and the crowd was evacuated as the burning barge was left to smolder offshore. Terrigal's family-friendly New Year's Eve show ended early and abruptly, becoming a vivid warning of how quickly a controlled display can turn into a firestorm when just one device behaves in a way no one planned for.